Whenever the train passed that spot on the tracks, voices played out in her head, and her bones felt like they had been dipped in ice and left out overnight in sub-zero weather. The feeling struck momentary fear into her body as she was paralyzed, and then she would shiver and the feeling would leave. But it was always the same, every day, at the exact same spot. And the voices, she could never quite hear them, just whispers as if many people were speaking at once, and never at a volume that could help her distinguish what they were saying. Like leaves rustling in the wind, all the voices blended together. There was nothing unique about the spot, nothing peculiar about it, nothing that made it stand out. Green grass grew high, small trees blossomed in the spring, died in the fall. The sun still graced the area with its rays, and nothing suggested that anything was wrong. Except the feelings, repeatedly experienced as she whizzed past the grass and the trees and the sun. Her head came up as the compartment door slid open. "Ticket, please." She dug into her purse and pulled it out. "Here you go." "Thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day." "You too." The conductor. She rode the train every day, and he still didn't know her, the girl with the mousy hair. "You would think by now that he would know that I ride the train every day, and that I have a monthly pass to ride the train, and he wouldn't have to check it, but he always has to check, and he always has to call me ma'am instead of my name, and he always has to wish me a nice day. Every day." He chatted with other people. She'd heard him do it before. People that she was sure were never on the train more than once a week or even a month. But to him they were chums, and she was just another passenger. She glanced down at her short, ragged nails, worn down by habit of chewing on them several times a day. And she did it now, leaning her head down into her hands, staring out the window and chewing on her nails until the train hit the spot and she stiffened, froze, shivered, and went back to chewing her nails. Maybe, she thought, he doesn't like that I chew my nails, or that I wear old clothes. Perhaps he finds me to lack class and poise. Maybe that is why he doesn't talk to me as he does to the other people. With that thought, she looked at her nails again and wrinkled her nose in disgust, sitting back and putting her hands down in her lap. I will have to stop doing that, she told herself. Then maybe he will start to talk to me. When her work was finished, she walked back to the train station, got on the train, and began to look out the window. It did not matter if the train was coming or going, she would always feel the chill, no matter which window or which side she sat on. Perhaps that place was haunted, she would tell herself. Some unmasterful disaster had brought cold spirits into the world, who now hovered over the space where they had met their untimely demise. Her eyes did not take in the familiar scenery as it blurred by her, but then she jerked up and her eyes focused. "Wait!" She pressed her face up against the glass, trying to look back, trying to see if it was true. Where she had normally felt the tingling tentacles of frost coating her bones, she had seen a boy. A young boy, no more than 5. He had been standing under the trees and looking at the train, emotionless. And now she could not see if what she had seen was true. Had a boy really been standing there? Had he really been looking up at the train? It was only then that she shivered as a thought came to her. Had he really been looking up at me? Her head came up as the compartment door slid open. "Ticket, please." She dug into her purse and pulled it out. "Here you go." "Thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day." "You too." This time, the conductor's lack of emotion and sociality did not bother her. She returned to the window, her breath frosting the glass as she tried to see the boy again. But trains move fast. Once it's gone, and you cannot go back. It was the next day that the door slid open, and as she dug her hand into her purse to pull out her ticket, she turned and jumped. I'm sorry," she finally breathed out. "You gave me quite a start." The young boy, dressed in a child's conductor uniform with overalls and a cap too big for his small head, stared at her. In his hands he clutched a piece of wooden track, the type a child would use to build routes for their toy trains, up and around mountains and through waterfalls and over bridges. He held onto it tightly. She could see the skin around it pinching together. When the boy said nothing, she continued, "Have you lost your parents? Do you need help finding them?" His dull eyes looked back at her. Something was wrong with them. Something was wrong with him. A child's eyes should not be so dull. They should be full of light, energy, happiness, wonder. She knew that. She did not have children of her own, but she saw them playing in the street. Sometimes she would pass them and say hello. Some would stare up at her, then run without a word spoken between them, but others would smile and say, Hello. Even those that stared had more life in their eyes than this boy. A troubled childhood, she thought. Or perhaps he is just scared. He cannot find his parents. Would you like help finding your parents? Don't worry, I can help you find them. Without uttering a word, the boy turned from her and walked back out the compartment, almost mechanically, it seemed to the young woman. A child should not walk like that. They should perhaps run or jump. Do children still like trains these days, she thought? She liked trains. The comforting feeling of the rocking as a train ran over the tracks, the subtle sounds of the train, the quiet whooshing through the air, the squeaks and creaks, they reminded her of a cradle, a comforting motion and sound that made it easy to lose oneself in thought or even fall asleep without trouble. Her head poked out of the compartment. She watched as the boy walked down the aisle and through the door at the other end, moving between cars of the train. Was it safe for one so young to do that themselves? Instinctively, her hand raised up to her mouth and she began to chew on her thumb. Would he be... Ticket, please. For the second time that day, she was startled and looked up into the eyes of the bored conductor who stood above her. Oh, yes, just... She fumbled with her purse. Damn it, I thought I had... Oh, here it is. She passed it through the open doorway to the man. Thank you, ma'am. Have a nice... He was turning to leave, but she spoke again. Wait! And he froze. Yes? So he could say more than ticket, please, and thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day, she thought. Did you see a young boy here? She faltered over her words. Maybe that is why he does not talk to me. I am not eloquent. Just moments before in this carriage, car, whatever you call these train sections. He was here only just now. You must have seen him. Young, dressed in overalls and a cap, like an old-time train engineer or a conductor. Stereotypical, you know. Slowly the man faced her again, once more looking down on her. A young boy, you say? Yes. No, sorry, ma'am, I have not. But have a nice day. And he was gone. Humph. She sat back in her chair. So much for doing his job, that man. How could he just brush off the fact that a child could be roaming loose on the train? What a complete... And her door slid open again. Oh, so now you've decided to take me seriously. She gave a small gasp. The boy was back. The dark circles under his eyes unchanged, his iron grip on the small wooden piece of track unchanged. She noticed now that the track was dirty, had bits of dust and grit in it, was well worn with divots and slivers of wood missing. But to the boy it did not matter. He held on firm all the same. She swallowed. Do you need help? The boy moved, looking down at the piece of track, then back up at her. Have you lost your toy train? No answer. Perhaps he is deaf. Maybe if I can... She began to dig around in her purse for a piece of paper and pen, then froze. The familiar feeling of the place had come, except this time the sensation seemed to last longer, as if time had begun to slow. I don't have a train anymore. Only her eyes were able to move up to see the boy. His face had not changed, nor did his lips move. I lost my train a long time ago, and I can't find it. I don't have a toy train anymore. The voice was in her head, resounding louder than the sounds of the train as the boy gazed at her. I lost my toy train. Have you lost yours? What? She could hear her thoughts. Those had not frozen. She remembered then as a child playing with trains, just as the boy before her must have done. The same wooden tracks, building them, and the feel of a small toy train in her hand as she wheeled it around, making choo-choo sounds, and letting the train go as it would self-propel down a hill in the tracks. The train could go anywhere. It could take her through waterfalls and green glades surrounded by trees, the police station, the grocery store. Her train took her everywhere. My train, she struggled to think. The memory so far away, so blurred and distant. Just images of her childhood and her train that could take her anywhere she wanted to go. But then they had passed the spot. The chill and paralysis was gone, and she was left in silence until one by one the sounds of the train returned to her. The wheels on the track, the creak of the connectors between the cars, the splitting of air as the train moved through it, and the boy was silent once more, staring at her before he turned. Wait! She almost stumbled to the door, her legs still numb, and then she looked out into the hallway that the boy walked down. She looked both ways. No one else was there. And then she darted from her compartment, her purse swinging behind her as she tried to catch up to the boy, who moved with purpose, not looking left or right, but always forward, always moving forward. Please slow down for a moment. I... Her dress caught in a door, and in her flurry of thought and action she pulled on it, ripping it free and opening the next door. She stopped. They had come to the end of the train, the caboose, and now stood looking out behind them. The piece of cloth from her dress was picked up by the wind, torn free, and blew away. She watched it twirl through the air and disappear. Far off in the distance she could see the row of trees where the grass grew green and the sun always shined, a place that held no foreboding premonitions. Yet she was frozen once more as the whispers of voices began to swirl all around her. She gripped onto the rail to keep from falling over the edge as the voices grew louder and louder. The boy appeared next to her. Strange that she had not noticed him moments before when she had first come out of the train. When he stepped into her view, she could hear everything. All the voices that had blended together separated themselves, and she could understand. "Damn it! Why can't you do what I say?" She heard a snap. It sounded like someone being hit. It was followed by a cry of a woman. "Just for once, what do you think you're doing? Get off the floor, stop sniveling." Another slap, and another. "Worthless little whore, get up off the ground. What are you doing down there? Do you think that is helping?" Slap. Slap. And then the woman. "Stop it!" Her voice was shrill and loud. "Stop it, stop it! You think you can come home and just treat me like this?" There were other noises, that of pots and pans banging around. "Oh, you think you're such a great man going out and working? When was the last time you could even hold it down a job for a month? Huh? Huh? Tell me that." "Don't you talk to me like that." The voices were escalating, and once again it was hard to tell what was being said as the angry shouts of accusations flew between the two people, each trying to overcome the other. And then the sounds were fading. She was no longer hearing them from their perspective. The screams had quieted. She was in another room of the house, the shouts lifting up to her. It was dark. She was there now. She could see, in an attic with wooden slats barely letting in light. A small boy sat. She was the boy, playing with a train, pressing it harder and harder into the tracks as the voices got louder and louder. Wet streaks ran down her face. The boy, was crying. And then he was sniffling as the train dug into his hands, bit into his skin. He tried to concentrate on the train, on the feeling that it burned into his hand. He was trying to imagine a train rocking back and forth and taking him away. Away from this. Away from the dark attic and the screams and the hits and the cold nights. The train was all he had. With numb hands, he pushed it around the track over and over, trying to forget where he really was, trying to imagine where the train was taking him. But he couldn't. He could not escape. Not with his toy train. And then there were more shouts. The boy was running. She could hear it. His breath, his feet on the ground, his mother screaming, "James! James, come back!" His father also yelling, "James, don't you dare take another step!" But he was there, right next to the tracks, almost there at a place where the grass grew green and the sun always shined, but where little trees had yet to grow. "James! James!" There was the running of more people now. 3 people altogether, 2 adults and 1 child. "James, no!" The tracks were there, under his feet. He could feel the rumble. He could hear the train whistle, and he knew he could get away. "James, move! Move!" He knew he could travel. He knew he could never hear the screams again. He knew the cracking sounds of blows would never sting his ears. Knew he would not be cold at night. Knew what the warm sun felt like and what it was like to be free. James. No! And then he felt no more. The woman gasped as her eyes flew open and she could breathe again. She stumbled back away from the edge of the train. The boy was before her, staring up at her. "I lost my toy train. I lost it. I lost it. I lost it," he kept repeating over and over, and then she could see it, from under his cap pouring down. Dark liquid, saturating his hair, dripping down into his eyes, now covering his arms and leaking from his overalls, covering him, bathing him. He reached up to lift his hat off, and that is when she turned and ran. She could not bear to see what was under there, what had killed him. So much blood, so much blood. She was running, tripping, and then she was clawing at her purse as it got caught in the door, frantically trying to pull it out. Behind her, she could hear the compartment doors slamming open, and then the connector door was opening, and she was screaming and fleeing, leaving her purse behind. She was falling. Darkness, blackness, the very carpet seemed to be streaming with the blood. Arms were around her, pulling her up and then setting her gently onto a seat. She breathed deeply, in and out. In and out. Then slowly opened her eyes. The boy was nowhere to be seen. She was back in her compartment with her purse by her side and the conductor sitting across from her. She was alive. "Ma'am," the conductor began. "No," she started. "No. Nothing is wrong. I'm fine. I'm fine, but listen, there's a little boy on this train, and I think he needs help, and you have—" She leaned forward, grabbing onto the conductor. "You have to have seen him. You cannot have missed him. He walks up and down the halls. He has a little wooden piece of track always in his hands, and— "Ma'am." The conductor gently pulled her hands from his arms and placed them back by her side. "Ma'am, please calm down." "I am calm. Don't tell me to be calm. Everything is calm. I'm calm. You're calm." "Ma'am, please. I know it is hard, but you have to—" "What is hard? What is so hard? Can you not understand that there's a boy out here and he's in trouble?" Her voice raised in volume. "Why is that so hard to understand?" "Ma'am, it is hard to grasp things when—" Grasp. "Oh, you must have completely lost your mind. You're so— Ugh." She stood to leave. Someone else on the train could help her. This moron could not. "Ma'am," he grabbed her. You dolt! Let go of me!" She tried to pull free from his grasp, but he forced her back down on the seat and then sat himself down across from her next to the door. "It can be hard. Hard. You have no idea what—" But the conductor continued on, ignoring her. "When you're dead." "Dead. Dead." She began to laugh. Dead. How very stupid of you to think—" She repeated the words again. Dead. And then her breath caught, and she could feel the air leaving her lungs, even as she said the words. She was choking. She couldn't breathe. Her life was leaving her. Her eyes met the conductor's, and she could see a twinkling in them, a certain light, an energy that had not been there before. And she recognized the eyes, though now changed with a sudden brightness in them. Could spirits age in this world she was trapped in? In his world? "We got another one, didn't we?" A voice broke her thoughts, and she looked down. Sitting next to the man was the boy, one and the same, no longer covered in blood. The boy looked up at the man and smiled, his eyes now lit with fire just as bright as the man's. "Yes, we did." "We don't have to be alone again, do we?" "Nope, never again." "I like it here, on my train." The boy hopped down from the seat, moving towards the door before turning back. "I like you. You're nice." For a moment he looked upset, as if he was just realizing he may have done something terribly wrong, but then he smiled again at the woman. "I'm glad you will be staying with me." He left the door open when he went out, and the conductor smiled at her once more. She was trying to cry out for help. She was still choking, could not move, could not breathe, could not live. Dead. The man stood and went out into the hall. She could still see both of them there, standing together. "We got another one," the boy said, smiling up at the man. "We sure did." Then the boy took the man's hand and they began to walk away. As they did, the man began to shrink, to change into what she had realized when she had looked into his eyes only a minute before, when he had told her that she was dead. For a moment there were two boys standing there, the same boy, a ghostly apparition of the boy that had been the man, and a solid boy standing next to him. But then the apparition faded, and the boy was no longer holding the man's hand, but rather another piece of track. But she still heard the man's voice as another door slid open. "Ticket, please." And the boy walked to the halls alone, smiling to himself, leaving the woman in the compartment to join all the other dead that were on his train.